Hello all, welcome to another edition of Low Code Cafe. This is episode number 156 for February 28, 2024. So today's topic is more on tables, charts, and maps. It's part two of an episode that we worked on 2 weeks ago. So we'll be working on AI-powered visualization and the DNN or Plantinap platform. I am Dale Warner, Head of Support for Plantinap, joined capably today by Patrick Anderson, Technical Success Manager at Plantinap. And together we'll be talking about how to do this tables, charts, and maps. Mostly Patrick can be keeping me on track as I sometimes get lost in my work. Anyway, this is an event we do every 2 weeks. It's a community webinar where we share updates, do demos, spend most of our time on hands-on coding. We record all these, put them out on YouTube, and so if you go to youtube.com/plantanap, you can subscribe and get alerts so that you'll know when we post new episodes of this and our other weekly event, the Low Code Campfire. Our agenda today, I'll be talking a little bit about some stories from the trenches of support, and then we'll go right on to our hands-on low-code development. Do engage with us. You can use the chat window or the question and answer. You can raise your hand if you want to talk, and when it's all over with, there's a feedback form. We do this every 2 weeks, so again, our next episode is scheduled for March 13th. Diving right into the From the Trenches segment, we'll talk a little bit about hotfixes. Our current version of Plantinap is version 1.25. This has been a particularly long release cycle, and we've had 83 different hotfixes that were available, and there are 3 more available this period. Just as a general reminder, if you're applying hotfixes, watch the notes. Take a look at the notes of things that you're going to apply. Some things require our app builder version 125.64 or higher. And if you don't install that and you install one of the hotfixes, you could break your instance. It's repairable, but avoidable. So keep your panic level down. Just read the notes that go with these different hotfixes. So the ones that are available became available this week had to do in this area the search. If you were to go into the configuration and try to search, previously the search wasn't loading. You would just get the forever loading animation and it wasn't coming in. That was because we implemented a security change and the library wasn't getting loaded. But in any case, now that's fixed. Another one, and this is probably a really nice one for those of you who have more established sites, there's improved token performance during when you're editing. So I can show this one a little bit. If you go into the tokens area, and as you start editing tokens, and you were going to make a change to them, that sometimes, let's say that we went in here and looked at a token here, and then maybe we went into another one and looked at another token, and you decided to edit it. What we're finding is that when you saved a token, save this, that our front end was calling a very long running, depending on how many tokens that you have, it might call a very long running API call to save the token once for each of these that you had open above. So we've done a couple things. One is that it only calls once, regardless of how many tabs that you have open, it's calling it once. So that was a correction. And then it is calling it in a more minimal way. Instead of trying to do everything, it's just focusing on the thing that you're trying to change. The end result is that when you click save or save and test, that it runs much faster. And so that's going to be a really good one for you to have if you do work in the tokens area and if you have a lot of tokens. Also, there was an issue with automation where it was a cosmetic issue, but if you go into updates and looked at the hot fixes in updates, you would see automation listed twice on this list. And now it will, so the fix resolves that. It was cosmetic, but needed to be resolved. So beyond that, just kind of a little bit of heads up about what's coming up. We are actively testing our next version, 126, and one of the properties of that is we've changed our approach a little bit. In the past, when you installed the next higher major version, you would get all the hot fixes installed automatically from a for a consistency of experience and to make sure that everything installs well. We've changed our policy to be that you'll during that upgrade experience, you'll want to install all of the hot fixes before going to the next version. Just make sure that anything that impacts the upgrade experience gets installed before you actually do the upgrade. Um, so there's no action required now. I'm not saying run out and go install all the hot fixes. What I am saying is you'll see a slightly different procedure where you will be required to install all the hot fixes when you do the upgrade. And again, we only during the middle of the release, we only recommend that you install the hot fixes that you need. But eventually you will have to install them all. And when you get to that spot where you're doing any update really, but certainly when you're doing the major update, the best practices are, as a reminder, that you do a backup before you start installing things. That way, if anything breaks, you have a place to go back to. It's always a good idea to practice on a clone if you have one available, so that you don't impact your production sites. And then finally, it's always a good idea to test and make sure that your application works, preferably before your users get in there and start changing data and make your backup invalid. I've deal with cases with a pretty good frequency on support where people have skipped one or more of these steps, and you get a week into using a new version of software and you find out things are a little bit different, or something that you used to rely on doesn't work anymore. You don't have any way and I mean that in terms of your implementation, the way that your application works. Maybe something has changed in a small way, and you have no way to go back, and so it makes it difficult. You can't go forward, you can't go back, and so test, test, test. Anyway, that's the best practices, the recommendations. Finally, another best practice recommendation is if you have questions, we are happy to answer them on support. So preferably before you try something that you're not sure about, if you send us put in a ticket, we'll be happy to provide some guidance and direction. The last thing I'll mention is that we have this other event that we do, and that's every week, the Low Code Campfire. It's Fridays during the same hour, and we get together and in a more conversational way talk about, rather than presenting a topic, we talk about what's going on with your implementations, what struggles you're having, and oftentimes we solve issues right in that hour or learn something new, all of us, as we share techniques. So do engage with that. You can sign up for that. The link to do that, Patrick is about to put that on the webinar chat, but you can register in advance for the Low Code Campfire. You can get to our webinar recordings, go to the community portal, lots of good stuff out there. And then that webinar feedback form that I mentioned, there's a link to that. So if you have any feedback on what you saw today, use that feedback form, or let us know what you'd like to see for another time. So now we still have 50 minutes to get in on our the best part of what we're going to do today, the hands-on low coding. And this looks like some kind of odd math. When I said minus part two, it's actually just hyphen part 2, but we're going to get into part 2 of tables, charts, and maps. So let's take a look at the solution that we came to last time. The overview was where we were trying to get to, and the Plantanet blue is where we actually got to. We created some test data with the use of AI. We got it to display on a map. I was planning to do 2 versions of the map, but I didn't get to that. We may get to that today or not, we'll see. But we have it on a map. We added some filtering, so you could filter by region, and we added a chart. We were planning to do a table visualization as well, but that didn't happen. And then I thought it might be fun to have more than just 10 cities in our map. So that's what we were trying to do, but we didn't get all the way there. So let's take a look at what we did get done, and then we'll start advancing. So the first is that we had this map. It was the locations map. We had a parameter data viz that says what visualization that we wanted. So the default one was a map, but we could also say chart. And if we went to the chart, it flipped to a chart.js chart. And then we also had region as a filter. So for example, you could say that you wanted only the cities in the West. And so we get Los Angeles, Seattle, Denver. And so we had these 2 parameters that we're paying attention to in the command line. The way that this was implemented, we had a form. Let's see, this is it right here. And it had some events that were going on. So the form events were that we ran a SQL query to get our data. So we were getting data out of the location. It had, we had filtering using the region parameter. So we're getting the region off of the query string and popping it in here. And we were adding a % sign to the end of it. So it would filter based on a prefix. And so we had the data being acquired this way. And then we had gotten it to the point that the visualization was coming from, we actually have a token that we're processing, and it's getting whatever visualization we want. So by default, it was using the default, but we could pass in chart. So this is where it was being passed, and then it was running this token get script, which was actually running a workflow. So all of this was, and you should take a look at the last episode if you don't remember it, but all of this allowed us to get the data from or rather get the visualization from a workflow. And so if we said what workflow we wanted, and all of these were put here. So we had the default one that was a leaflet map, and it had all the content, the links to the style sheet, and some code that produced the JavaScript code that produced the leaflet map was one path, and then another path was all the code necessary to produce a chart using chart.js. So if you're just catching on and seeing this now, and it might be useful for you to go back and catch that, but that's where we were doing. So yeah, the form events were doing the acquisition and the scripting was being provided by a workflow. That's where we came from. So what are we going to do today? Well, I think it would be useful. This user interface isn't very friendly yet. So we're going to start by enhancing the user interface to make it nice to work with. We're going to enhance the data filtering to do more filtering than just by region. In the same way that we moved the visualization to a workflow, we'll move the data acquisition to a workflow. That'll help us be able to use that in more places or to work on it. And just separating the user interface from the business logic. I want to get to more test data. 10 cities is nice, but more cities would be better. And then depending on how much time we have after that, we might get to visualize this data as a table as well. And maybe someday, maybe we'll get to doing the new version of the map because that's cool, but we'll see how much time we have. So let's start with enhancing the user interface. The user interface as it stands is, it displays the information pretty good, but we don't have any way to control this. So we're going to add a control form that will control the display, and then that'll have a region drop down. And then I'm not very fond of the way that this centers the map. This map is being centered to include all of Hawaii and some of Alaska, and I really just need it to be the continental US for my imaginary purposes here. So let's see if we can clean up some of that. So the first piece of this is I'm going to set it up as a side-by-side display where we have a control form on the left and the map on the right. So I'm going to start out by moving this module to a container called P275.2. It's down here listed. You can see the name here, but what this is going to do is put that on the right 2/3 or the right 3/4 of the screen, and it leaves me a place to put the form. And so then I'm going to put a control form, or a form that's going to become my control form, here on the left. And so we'll manage that and start it out as a blank form. So I like to name things. So this will be our control form. And I have a preference for putting my labels on the top, so we'll do that. And then what kind of control do we want to do? Let's see, I've got not the right things open here yet. So I'm going to save and go back. And so this is my locations. And so now I have the locations page. I have this location form on the right. I'm going to get this control form open in a new screen as well. So now we can have access to both of those. And I'm going to close this out so that we can just see it as it's going to be. So we're going to start building this area right here in our control form. The things that we've already determined is that if the command line says something like data viz equals chart, that it switches to a chart. So if I can control this query string, I can change what's happening on the right here. And so that's where I'm going with this. So the first thing we're going to do is we will add a radio. So it's going to be a radio box, and it's going to be called, let's see what I called it over here. This is going to be called something like display as is the title, but I'm actually going to call it data viz just for clarity for me. So the items that we have here are going to be things like we want to display it as a map, which has the value of default, or chart, which has the value of chart. So the user is going to be able to pick one of those, and then we'll have a button that says apply. And what the button is going to do is a redirect to our portal page. And we're not going to select a page, so it's going to come back to the current page. And we're going to pass a query string. So data viz equals the data viz. So we're going to pass a command string to pass the data viz. It's going to take whatever the form value of data viz is, and it's going to redirect to that page. So let's see what this looks like. So now we have a display as, it can be a map or a chart. We say map and apply. Notice that it's got data viz default here. If we say chart and apply, we can flip it. So now we can flip it back and forth easily, and we don't have to manipulate this, at least directly. I'm not really a fan of this format, and so on my apply button, I'm going to say to change an option. I don't want to use the URL provider to form the query string. That's a preference. It works, but I like it to be in this kind of format with the question mark. So we'll do that. So that's our first improvement that we can make, that we've got this control form, but and we're controlling which kind of display. But now let's do a region drop down. So let me see if I can find. I've got a lot of things open here. Let's. What is this? Okay, so here are our regions. Here's our test data, right? And we've got regions, Midwest, Northeast, whatever. And so if we took a list of these regions and put it into a drop down, we could select regions and pass that on into the query string as well. So I am going to work in our SQL console a little bit and build up a little SQL query that'll do that. So what we want to do is select region from, I'm clicking here to get a copy so I can just paste from app location. And so we get a list of regions. Well, there's some things that are duplicate here. Here's where a little SQL comes in handy. If we say distinct, then we just get one representative for each one. And then maybe we want to order by region so that they always come out in the same order and alphabetical order. You know, you can work with this how you want, but this gets a nice display of region. So we can go back to our control form and add that as a single choice drop down. We'll call this the region as the title and as the ID. And we're going to, for our data source, we're going to do a SQL query. We'll use the SQL query we just developed. And so now, this is, well, again, I like to do one step at a time here, so we'll refresh. We've got our drop down now, not really in a very nice place, but we've got our drop down. And so now we just need to wire it to the apply button, maybe move it around a little bit. Let's start there. So we'll put the region above the apply button. And in the apply button, we're going to need to, when we redirect, we're going to need to go to region equals region. So it's going to pass on the query string the region. And yeah, we'll worry a little bit more in a minute about making these a little bit persistent and defaulting well, but let's start with this. So we can now go to say that we just want the South records and apply. And so now we get region equals South. If we go to the Northeast, we get different map points based on that. And if we switch it to a chart, well, it didn't persist, so it went back to everything. So let's say we want a chart of the South and apply. At least it's working. So now we need a little bit of persistence. One easy way to do that is that we can say, for our initial value of the initially checked of our map, we can use get or session colon and then data viz. So what this says is whatever's on the command line, or if we've saved it before in session, and this thing does it all at once. It saves it in session. So the data viz, it's going to get it whatever's on the command line and apply it here. And we can even apply a default here. So if it's blank, it's going to get the word default. So that'll persist that. And then we'll do the same thing with region. And where is it? Initially selected. The value we're going to do is from the command line called region, and the default, if there's nothing, is going to be blank. So just with those two changes, now we're going to start seeing some persistence. So it's taking whatever is up here and filling these in. And even if because it's working through session, even if we blank that out, it's still going to persist. So that's kind of nice. So we can apply that choice and it works. So now we can go to map and all of the no region selected and get everything. We can go to the west. We can switch it to a chart, and all that just remains nicely persisted. So we've gotten through our first couple of objectives to enhance, so we got a nice user interface. Let's work on centering the map on the continental US. So if we remember, the map is being, the code for this map is actually coming from the workflow called the data viz script. And so if the data viz is default, then it goes in here. This is the code for that. I can stretch this down a little bit so we can see a little bit more code, but you can see the JavaScript. And along the way, you can see in here that the map is getting created at a particular latitude, longitude, and zoom level. It's the default view. So if we knew where the center of the continental US was, we could swap out these parameters. So one way to do this would just be to ask the question, what is the So it's given us some nice values here, which we can pop in. So I'm going to copy and paste these. So we'll put both of those on the clipboard. So it says the center is Lebanon, Kansas. So let's see if we can do that. So we'll replace that one with that. Replace this one with that and save. So now we go back and hit apply. And we get slightly different centering. So even without knowing JavaScript, we could just see where those parameters were and fix it. And so now that suits our needs. So we've gotten that far. So moving on, the next thing that I want to accomplish is we're filtering by region. I'd like to enhance the filtering to deal with population. So we'll have min pop and max pop. And then, so we'll add that to our control form and to the map. So I'm going to start with the control form. We'll add a field. It will be a number type field, and that's going to be min pop. And actually, we'll make a nice total title for it here. And in sticking with our defaulting, just like we did region, we're getting the initial value off the command string. We're going to put the initial value of this, and we'll get it off the command string as well. And the default, what we want is 0. So that'll get it for us. And then just like we're doing minimum population, we can clone this and we can do maximum. We've done it from scratch, but it's maybe a little bit of a shortcut. And so then we're also going to default it from command string. And so we have a maximum population. But instead of this, let's say that we want 10 million. So this will auto default to everything 0 to 10 million. And so now we need to wire this to our apply button. So we can say when we redirect, we will pass in pop equals form and max pop equals what. So with those changes, while we can refresh here and see them, when we hit apply, they're now going to be in the query string. But of course, this doesn't, we haven't passed these along to the data query yet. So that's a problem. And then I didn't remember to change the layout. So let's move our button down so it's at the bottom. That's just make it make a little bit more sense that way. So now that we have it here, we can wire it to the location form. And so that is simply going into the SQL query where we're getting the data and adding some clauses here. So we can say and population greater than min pop. Those are SQL variables that we need to bind. So we'll do min pop and max pop, and then we got to pass the values in. So we're going to get for session min pop and by providing these default values, then even when map renders for the first time with nothing in session, it'll still render correctly. So now we're limiting this by min pop, max pop. And so let's see if it works. So we'll say that we only want things up to 5 million. Passing it up here. I can't type. Patrick, this is your fault. You're supposed to stop me when I make a typo.
Sorry, missed it, Owen.
All right, so now we're New York was omitted. If we change this down to 3, then now we see less cities, and of course it's useful. The same data that we're doing applies to a chart. So as we change our data, we get different values here. And so now it's maximum population 2 million. And so we can see this is 1.6, 1.3, 769. So we're getting a double bang for your buck because the same filtering applies to both our maps and our charts. Cool. So we succeeded at minimum and maximum, and we changed our control form. Didn't take long. So yeah, let's move on. Set as a goal at the top that we could change this to a workflow. So the idea is that if we separate our business logic from the user interface, now the user interface just gets simpler and simpler. Our business logic right now, this running of the SQL query is happening right here on one action. But we can take this SQL and just move it into our new workflow. So this workflow is going to be like a get location data workflow. So we'll call it that. So first we'll start by naming it. And this, we're going to run the exact same SQL. And so we'll paste our SQL in here. And then we got to do some work to pass it as parameters and things like that. So let's start doing the work right away. So we still have to have region and min pop and max pop. These are going to end up coming from our parameters to the workflow. So we'll turn them into parameter calls. And so these three things need to be parameters then. So we'll do that in a minute. But this same SQL is going to work just fine. And then the result that we need is going to be something we need to just output. It's going to be JSON, right, that comes out of this. And so we're going to call this as something like location data. It doesn't really matter what we call it. But we do need to output it. So we output location data as an output parameter. And of course, my behind the scenes instance is timed out, so give me just a second to get signed back into that. And then as we keep working here, we need to pass these things in. So we're going to have a region parameter and a min pop parameter and a max pop parameter. By the way, I'm using the Windows clipboard if anyone hasn't seen that before. Do a little typing here. The minimum population and the maximum population will make sure that those are numbers coming in. The region makes sense to keep as text. And we're not going to provide any default values for these. So we have region, min pop, and max pop coming in. We do a process that runs a SQL query that uses all of those things. It's the same SQL query we had before. We're getting location data out as the result, and we're outputting it. So this nice standalone query we can test. We'll go no region and 0 and 10 million, and we're not getting any location data. I know the answer to this one. I've already hit it once before. Why is that? The region that it gets passed is it needs to have a percent sign so that it has some kind of wildcard. It has to be like something, and I omitted that wildcard. So if a blank region value is passed in, we still want everything. So let's try that again. So all regions, we're going to do 0 to 10 million. Now we get some nice JSON. And if we change it that we only want the West region, then we get less data, and we could manipulate it by population as well. So if we can run this workflow, we can get data, and so now we can go back to our location form, and instead of running the SQL query directly, we can instead run run the workflow. Now this workflow has been opened here when we created, excuse me, this administrative screen was open while we created the workflow. We wouldn't be able to find this action that until we refresh. So I'm going to refresh this, and so now when we go into our events, we can have this get location data workflow now appears, and we want this to happen above the selection of the data visualization. And we're going to need these things here. So I'm going to copy them, and we're also going to want to put it in the same result as locations. So I'm going to false this out. This is one technique when you're doing development. We can just false out this run of SQL, and we can paste this back in here. So we're going to pass the region that we want, the minimum population that we want, maximum population, and it's going to go into locations. So all the same parameters we had before, but now we're just passing it to the workflow. And actually, I'm going to convert this to a get or session just so the whole thing is running on session. All right, so if it works, if we refresh this and it works, it's just a sign that it's using this workflow. We didn't break anything. We didn't get any advantage yet. We've just abstracted it out into a workflow. So we can now get rid of this, and so now location data is coming from this SQL, coming from this workflow, which is running SQL. So now that same workflow could be used to return data to other things and work exactly the same way. It's no longer tied to the form. All right. And so this was 0 to 102. Let's put it back to our maximum so we can get all of the full map. So working nicely. All right. So now we've made location data reusable, but let's move on to the next bit of fun. I really want more data, and so you can do this by way of this is kind of the original query that we had. We said we wanted 10 rows of sample data in the JSON form, and this is the exact form that we needed it in. We needed to be in this form because we built an importer. We didn't talk about that today, but we built an importer. And so we could go and just do the same thing. Just copy and paste this into a AI session and get some more test data. So it looks something like this. And this would give us now 100 rows instead of the 10 rows that we had. So this is just, expanding our data a little bit. So I've already run this query. This would take about 2-3 minutes to run, and I'm just going to save the time. I've already run it and gotten the answer. And so we are in a position to be able to import more data using the results of that AI session. We had our importer right here, and I have the answer on my clipboard here. Whoops. hopefully I have the answer on the clipboard. So I have cities here ready to go. So I'm just going to, and actually, there's one more thing I want to do. Since I have 100 new cities on my clipboard, I'm actually going to delete out the ones that I had originally. So delete from app location. So we'll start over. App location will get emptied, and then we'll run our importer with these 100 cities that I have done. Runs quite quickly, and if we were to go to our city list, we now see it actually gave me even more, it gave me 111 cities, but we have a whole bunch of cities in here now that we can look at, and so let's see what happens. And you're going to find that it breaks, or it might break. Let's see. If we go to the East Coast and apply, we might get a map, but if we try and do it for everything, we won't get a map. And I'm about to explain why. So let's do that. We've got a lot more data, and for some reason it's different. Well, here's what happens. SQL has a maximum size limit for displaying JSON text. And so small data sets, it's under the limit, and everything gets returned in one row, just as you would expect. But when you get lots of data, hundreds of rows, if once it exceeds that limit, it splits that text into multiple rows. And so when we are doing this in our, doesn't matter what, we're doing it in this location data now. But what this query would do when it gets lots and lots of data, it's putting this result is not just one row anymore. So location data isn't because it's not just one row, then that it's not a nicely well-formed JSON anymore. It doesn't have the first row doesn't have the ending bracket. The first row is what we were returning. We can I think we can see this if we were to save and test it and see the problem. So we'll do everything from 0 to 10 million again and run it. When we look at the output, we can see we have a nice bracket and a brace there to start, but we get to the end and since it's only returning the first row, it doesn't have all the data. All right, so it tells us what the problem is, and tells us, the solution is that you can apply pagination, you can transform the data ourselves, but the one that we're going to go for is to output in send the output send the output into a varchar max variable, and so that doesn't have a size limitation, and so we're going to get all of the data. So let's see what that looks like. I've done this query in advance, and you'll be able to see it on replay, but we're here. Yep, this is the query, and it's been improved in a couple of ways. I'm just going to copy and paste it into our query here. So instead of this one, and I can actually just comment this out so that we can see it, for a moment, we can see the comparison with the new one. I'm going to paste the new one in here. So what we're doing is declaring a nice long max variable here, and then we're setting it equal to a select statement. The select statement is the exact same thing. It's selecting everything from location with our min pop and max pop and region and ordering. All that's happening. We're also doing it without an array wrapper. So it starts out being without the brackets. We're doing a test and says if the map data isn't null, then we're putting brackets on either side of it so that we have a nice array format as an output. And if it is null, we're doing a bracket output. So it's returning an empty array. And this actually helps us with uh, when the array is empty, it'll still display the map or the chart if it can without blowing up. So and we're still keeping all the same um, variables. So when we save and test this thing now, we do the same thing looking for 0 to 10 million. We have our nice beginning syntax, we have all of our output, and we have a nice ending syntax with the brackets on the end. So it's now returning a nice output. So when we go back here and just refresh this, we now get our map displaying with lots and lots of data points. And so that fixes the data query. So when we did this originally, and last week we used a very simple query that works with a few data points, we've improved that so that it'll work with many, many data points. And I don't think we've clicked in here, but these have these nice hovers with all of our data, the latitude, longitude, population. Notice the regions actually changed in this example. We have more of them, and because we just wired it to that distinct query off the data, that we can, it still works just as we would expect. Nice. And so now we have charts and maps and maybe we only want up to 5 million here. All right. We're coasting into the end. We've got 8 minutes left, and if there's questions now would be a great time. But if we don't, we can see how far we can get into doing a table.
Dale, I wasn't sure that I completely understood why it was in the query that you had to um, uh, do it without the array wrapper and then add the brackets.
Um, that is a great question, and I'm not sure. That's let's see if it's possible without it. I'm not sure that it is necessary. So um, let's try that. That's exciting. So this is our query where we left it, and in that same spirit, I'm going to make a copy of this, and we'll comment out the variation that I had and see if we can do it. So instead of saying without an array wrapper, we'll leave it with an array wrapper. And I'm just going to super simplify this and see what it returns. So we're just going to take whatever it does and see if it does it the way that we would hope. So 0 to 10 million. And maybe this.
So, I mean, that's okay. We don't have to understand clearly.
Yes.
There was a reason.
Yeah, I think there
Yeah.
was, and I don't know
Okay.
what that is. So back to working. Okay. And Mark had the right answer. We
Oh
didn't
yeah.
select it out. Once we created it, we didn't select it. So yeah, we're at the. I don't think we're going to be able to get to the other thing. So let's deal with this great question. again. Out array wrapper to nice array wrapper. That's what we expect. And then if we do it again and nothing, so we still need to deal with if it returns nothing, then
Oh
we
yeah. Hmm.
have a blank one. So you know, my method dealt with that. And so for example, it's not returning valid JSON at this point, so we're not going to get any map or chart out of it
Oh, okay. Mhm.
because of that. But we could add a test to the end of that and get that to work as well. So there's lots of different ways to do things, but certainly
Sure.
it does work. Um, the other, since let's deal with a little cleanup stuff. We didn't get to some of the big objectives, but we could do something here. So another button, for example, might be a clear selections button, and from a to make that function, we could do something like a create context tokens that would have min pop setting to 0, max pop set back to our million, region set back to blank, and then do an Ajax action. And let's put that button in some place that might make sense. I'm going to put it here. So now we have something that would, we had clear selections and it goes back to the normal default settings and displays. That might be a useful thing to put in a list. Let's see what happens if we chart everything. So where else? Oh, nope, chart and apply. Where else could we go with this? We could have additional visualizations. So for example, this chart, we could ask AI to turn it into a pie chart or some other kind of a chart. So that would be a useful thing. Um, I threatened to do different variations on the map, and we'll see if we do that on another time. And then a table view. So it would be, you could see it would be easy to extend this setup that we've done to accomplish that. And if there's interest, I'll take that on in our next episode. We'll see whether that's better to do that in a third installment or leave it to your imaginations. But with that, we at least hit most of the target that we were trying for today. So I will say happy low coding. Thanks for joining for this episode of Low Code Cafe. And if you have more that you'd like to talk about that, we'll be getting into it again in Low Code Campfire on Friday. Thanks all for attending. See you next time.